We're about to tell you a story about how we fell in love, how we saw the Lord's faithfulness in directing that process, and how we are going to spend the rest of our lives together in love, serving Jesus.
Right.
Okay, so a quick upshot is Katie was a student at Northwestern College. I got hired to be a resident director.
The first person I meet on my senior year in college is Erick, as he greets me and my parents at the door, asking us if he can help us move anything in. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this guy is very handsome. And my mother also recognized the fact, because when we got up to my room, she quick closes the door and says, "Katie, who is that?" And I said, "I don't know, I think he might be the new RD." She said, "He's so your type." I said, "Thank you, Mom, for pointing that out," because I already realized that, recognized that.
Yeah, so we just became friends, spent time together in groups, being on the same staff, the same building.
It was great just to see how the Lord continually intersected our paths, even in that, where he was like, okay, all of a sudden we would be assigned to do the same project, or we would be in the same group talking. And so even from the beginning, kind of seeing the Lord setting apart our friendship and us being able to get to know each other. Okay, so I'm starting to journal about Erick, and I said, what I will say is that in all of my life, I have never known a man like this. If nothing else, I'm given the chance to know him so that I know men like him actually exist. I pray that the Lord would give me a man just like him, or even half the man he is. This man gives me hope that what I'm holding out for actually exists.
By October, a mutual friend of ours, Jenna, asked if I was interested in Katie, and I said, yeah, I think we're good friends, but since she's a student, I would obviously not think of more than that, more than friendship. And so I just kind of laid that out. And I said, if she wasn't a student, then maybe we'd have a different conversation. And then another thing too, simultaneously while I was having that conversation, I was obviously praying a lot about our friendship.
I asked the Lord 6 bold prayers for Erick. One of the prayers that I was praying is that the Lord would be softening his heart towards marriage and to the idea of us being married, and also that the Lord would increase his awareness to his aloneness. And just some of the other prayers I was praying, one would be that the Lord would be giving me favor in Erick's eyes, and also that the Lord would be knitting our souls together, so that, and two, that the Lord would be giving us time and intentional conversation with each other. So just that, okay, Lord, if you want to work, you need to do this.
Yeah, over fall break, I had a dream about Katie, and we were talking about fantasy football, which is one of her favorite pastimes. So I Facebooked her about it and said, hey, I had a dream about you. We were talking about fantasy football. Hope you're having a great break. And then that's kind of all I said.
So for me, that was okay, well, who gives us our dreams? The Lord gives us our dreams. So it's I don't know if Erick thought about me at all on fall break, but I know that the Lord gave him a dream about me. So from that point was kind of a turning point for me, where I was okay, Lord, I can fully trust you in this. I just need to step back and let you work. Okay, so then at the beginning of November, I am going to study at this coffee shop, and in 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, Erick walks in, and it's okay, and there's a table open right behind me.
Yeah, well, there were other tables available, but I obviously was why would I not sit close to a Northwestern student so I could mentor and disciple people at Northwestern. So in December, I was taking our good friend Paul to the airport, and we were just kind of catching up on some life things, and I was just sharing with him a little bit about my friendship with Katie. And he's one of the first people at Northwestern that I shared, other than with Jenna, saying, yeah, I feel like I've really started to be bonding with Katie. And so I said, it was more from a friendship mentoring standpoint of saying, hey, I want to get your insight on this, I value your thoughts on this, / I think I might be in love with a student.
What's so ironic is that probably the same morning, I was bringing Jenna to the airport, and I'm Jenna, I am so attached to him. What do I do? This can't be appropriate, because he is an RD and I'm a student.
And so we didn't have communication really from the beginning of Christmas break, because I'm going from, okay, I have a lot of friends. Katie's a great friend of mine. I really am attracted to Katie and drawn to Katie. Do I feel called to marry Katie? So some pretty deep elements to be sorting out, but that's what I did for probably that next month and a half or so. Very limited communication. For
some reason I just felt yeah, I just need to wait this out, let him take the lead. I'm just gonna hang back. And so for the first week it was fine, but after that, all of a sudden I was so sad. I felt like I missed my friend, and it was really just sad for me, where I was like, this is so hard just to not talk to Erick. And so I think during that time I was like, okay, Lord, like, if it means just being friends with him and only being friends with him, I'll just be friends with him. But then he talked to me.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
So then by mid to end of January, I was like, yeah, I'm all in, basically. The point I came to, and the point of peace where I knew I could have my heart fully set, was where I was saying, I'm all in for Katie, and if it's not Katie, I don't know who it would be.
And so then Valentine's Day, he ends up running into me in Arden, but his friend Brad is there, this guy Alex, and I had met Brad before, and so Brad and I were talking, and he's like, hey, have you had dinner yet? And I was like, no. So he says, why don't you come to dinner with us? And I was thinking, okay. We end up going to Bahasel, which is right next to Arden, and Erick pays for all of us. So I'm thinking, okay, Valentine's Day, he's paying for our dinner. So I put my hand on his shoulder, I'm like, thank you for paying for us. It's great, you know.
Oh, is that not what you're going in for?
No, sorry.
Okay. So we're at Baja Sol, gazing longingly into each other's eyes, with 3 other ever good friends there, which was great. So we spent our first Valentine's together
And then,
with 3 chaperones. And then,
don't you remember what else
oh
happened?
my gosh, yeah. Okay, so then, I don't know how this happened, but Brad goes, let's go to Tim's house. And I'm like, oh no. So I'm like super uncomfortable about it. So anyway, we end up going to Tim's house. I like introduce Katie. They're all like talking to her, because obviously Tim already knew
and
who
Tim
Katie
is like,
was.
oh hey Katie, so great to meet you.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, dude, he totally knows who I am.
Yeah.
Like, he's not making it obvious, but I can tell he knows who I am.
Yeah.
And here I am sitting, I'm like, okay, I'm with Erick's like really good friends, some of his best friends,
Yep.
alone, off campus, being introduced kind of as his. And I was like, this can't be okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, it's super awkward. I'm like, we got to get out of here.
We were there like 10 minutes, 15 minutes tops.
So having conversation with Jared and a little bit with Paul about my friendship with Katie. When I got to the point of saying, okay, I want to pursue Katie after she graduates, then it was more intentional conversation where I asked for 2 things. I said, one, I would like to at least let Katie know how I feel about her. I feel like having some clarity in that would be beneficial and good. And although Katie had never asked for that, I just felt like in an honoring situation for her, it would be good for her to have clarity in that. Second thing was, I said, is there a way we could have a structured hangout time, not dates, but maybe once a week, hang out for an hour in a structured environment. So then Jared and Paul talked to our good friend Nina, who works in HR, and they just said, you know what, you can do the first one, you can express to Katie how you feel. Second one wouldn't be an option, understandably so. The only caveat was I needed to have a staff member there with us when I was telling her how I felt. So it comes down to it where we decided that we're gonna have this conversation. I wasn't in a position to let Katie know that ahead of time, so I called her. So I called her and just said, hey, is there any way you can meet me in Paul's office tonight at 5 or 5:30? And didn't really have a lot of detail other than saying we would need to kind of talk through.
We need to talk about us. The word us sends me into the closest thing to a panic attack I've ever had. I'm like freaking out. I changed like 15 times. I'm pacing around my room. I'm like, I can't do this. Because I'm thinking, okay, so Jenna said he's going to talk to me about the appropriateness of our friendship. If we're having this meeting with Paul, like, it's not going to be good. It's going to be like, hey, Katie, I can tell that you have a crush on me. I can tell that you're, like, reading into things. Like, I just want you to know that I'm not interested in you. And I felt like in front of Paul, I was like, oh, I really respect this man, and I really respect Erick, and I'm in love with Erick. So I was like, great, this is going to be awful. I was like, I can't do this. So I call him back, and I go over to campus. So the 2 of us have like a moment, and Erick's just like, hey, thanks for being willing to meet.
And barely talk. I couldn't formulate words. It was like when you're super cold and you're like freezing, and your like mouth is shaking. Like I couldn't even formulate words correctly. I felt like.
Which is funny because I thought he was being super confident, and so then he says to me, I just want you to know this isn't what I would have wanted. And I'm like, this is awful.
Yeah.
And I had asked Jenna, I said, Jenna, just tell me one thing, because I knew that she knew what was going to be said. I said, am I going to feel really shameful after this meeting? And she says, no, I don't think so. Like, I think you just need to go. We sit down in this meeting, and then he's like, so Eric, do you want to start? And I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to start. I don't know what we're here for. And then he says, Eric's like, well, I guess there's no really good way to segue this. And Paul's like, I think you just have to say it. And Eric's like, yeah. And I go, I hate that both of you know exactly what you're talking about. I have no idea right now.
So I proceed to basically commit myself to waiting for Katie and saying it was really pretty one-sided, where I was just saying this has been my experience with our relationship. This
Please,
is why I care about you.
You looked at me with all sincerity and you said that I have enjoyed every minute of getting to know you. You said all these things that you appreciated about me, that you loved about me, and then you said, and I want to pursue you romantically after you graduate. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, it's totally out of left field. I was totally surprised. Like, you think I wouldn't be surprised, but I had convinced myself that it wasn't happening, and so I was really surprised.
So
I just said, yeah, I'd be on board with that. That was the only clarity we had. All this whole time until I graduate, that's all Eric knew, is that I said, yeah, I'd be on board with you pursuing me romantically.
Yeah.
And then spring break happened, so we didn't talk about it at all. We didn't really get to process it at all.
The one thing they told me in general guidelines, they said we want to keep this vague so it's not too oppressive. They said, don't be Facebooking every day and things like that. So I took that as, don't be Facebooking every day, so we would Facebook every 2 or 3 days, whereas I think looking back, their intention was more, don't Facebook regularly type deal. So I guess spirit of the law versus letter of the law. So
one night I'm on duty and Eric comes to talk to me, hang out with me, which was kind of routine. He always would come when I was on duty, which I thought was him working in his office all the time, but
I was working in my office, I just always knew when she was on duty.
Yeah.
So.
And so he comes down to hang out, I don't know what, 9, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, talking with Katie,
and
talking with the other RA
on duty. Me, so. And then about midnight-ish, the other person leaves, and then all of a sudden it's 2:30 in the morning. All of a sudden it's 3:30 in the morning. And it's okay, we should go to bed. It's really late. And so we do the whole Minnesota goodbye where, okay, so 3:30, we're picking up our stuff, talking, and then 4 o'clock, we're locking the door. 4:30, we're in the stairwell talking, finally saying goodbye.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's a daylight savings time the next day, so it's kind of like we're staying up till 5:30.
And I obviously knew, I knew there's no way I should be talking to a student, that late at night. So there was never a question of oh no, this is probably fine. I'm yeah, I'm screwed. A couple days go by. I have a one-on-one meeting with Jared, and then he casually brings up that he had become aware that Katie and I were hanging out, and he asked me how late we were staying up, and so I told him, yeah, we stayed up this late, and this is kind of what it looked like. We were in the duty office. We were out in the open.
There's people around.
Yep. So, in no uncertain terms, we had a very clear conversation about how inappropriate that was, which was completely sanctioned on his part. Not the most enjoyable conversation, but very good interception on his part, very much being about integrity, really wanting to protect Katie, wanting to protect me. So the whole time it was very, not a pleasant conversation, but I have a lot of respect for Jared for having that conversation with me.
Please, he basically took you out behind the shed. It's but you had to know it was coming. And then Paul's we're having our second meeting today. Because you had stopped me in the hall earlier that day and said, hey, I had a conversation with Jared, and this is kind of what he said. And I was whoa, I don't want you to be reprimanded. I don't want it to bring any shame to you, because you're a good man and you've only acted in respectful ways towards me. And so I said, I'll do whatever it takes to not have you have to have that conversation again.
So we meet with Paul that day, and Paul basically lays out, you guys need to fast from communication with each other. So you can interact like any other student-staff relationship. If you see each other in the hall, you can talk about the weather. But no texting, letters, no communication. You can't hang out at all.
No long conversations, no duty office times, nothing.
It's hey, what's up in life, and then move on. So one of the things I really appreciate is how, one of the things in January I asked the Lord is to build faithfulness and loyalty into me. And so I think that one of the things he was asking me was saying, I'll build faithfulness and loyalty into you. And in your pursuit of Katie, you can pursue her, but it needs to be by waiting. So I felt like the Lord was really bringing about a lot of restoration and healing in my heart through that. So yeah, it was a hard time to not be able to talk to Katie, not to be able to spend time with her, but I was journaling through this whole time, as Katie was as well, so it was helpful to be able to kind of process things out like that. Still really not sure, and I think that was a part of the faithfulness piece where I still wasn't sure where Katie was at, and so I knew going in there's a chance that we're going to get to May and she's not going to be interested in dating, but I was so sure that it was Katie or no one else that I was locked in on that too. So the only real communication I got to have with Katie is I received a letter from her, and the letter was basically, I don't really know how to process or sort out what's going on. I feel like I need more time. So I took this as Katie is totally putting me in friend zone, which if you're a man, you know what friend zone is. And I'm like, awesome, that totally sucks. I know my mom doesn't like me to say that, but it totally sucks. And so I write her a letter back, and I'm like, I basically say, I know I'm in friend zone, it's okay, we'll just like kind of ride this out and see what happens. And then I didn't really hear anything back, so.
Okay, so here it comes to be, we are maybe 4 or 5 weeks into our fasting time, and it's just really hard, where I feel like I've just been handed, you know, whatever, and I don't really have a choice in the matter. And so I felt like I want a voice in this. I have had 2 meetings where I've been kind of surprised. I want to say what I want to say, and so we had this meeting where I say I want to end it early so we can have some transition time at least. And so, because I knew Erick was serious, and I thought, yeah, I know he like wants to date me, and I just want to be sure. I want things to be normal. I want there to be transition. I mean, that's not too much to ask. But during the meeting, Paul, who we get done, and he says, you know, Katie, your thoughts are really valuable. I'm like glad we had this meeting. Like, I want you to have a voice. I want you to be heard. And he said, but you guys can't end, like, basically your thoughts are valuable, but it's not going to happen. And I was like, what? Why not? And he's like, you can't just be friends. And I'm thinking, yeah, we can't just be friends. I want to be friends because I'm not really sure. I'm confused. And Paul goes, Katie, you're not the problem. And I was like, that is the problem. And so because he knew where Erick was tracking from a heart level, and he knew how serious he was, and I knew how serious he was, and I was serious. I wasn't taking it lightly either, but I, you know, just had a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions, because it's not really a normal dating situation. It's not really a normal relationship, and so that was really hard. It was kind of like, well, I just need to sweat it out. I had started a countdown, and it was great to see, though, how the Lord honored our time together, because in the last 2 weeks where I had asked the fasting time to stop, Erick and I saw each other like so much during those 2 weeks, more than I had seen him in the past 8 weeks before that, where we were able to talk a lot, we were able to have communication. And so it's great to see how Northwestern said, no, this is still our policy, we're sticking by, and how the Lord said, this is, like, I'm going to honor your faithfulness in this. Erick coming into my life, Erick pursuing me, Erick being part of my life, Erick being the man I'm marrying, is one of the ways that I have seen the Lord's faithfulness to me in the most tangible, real way.
With Katie, it was somebody that I just loved spending time with, so it was natural that if I want to spend time with her so much, I feel like the Lord is drawing us together, that we would date and then get married. I look back at things that I was praying for and hoping for, and Katie is all of that and more. But the base of it is just loving spending time together when we serve together. So I'm really excited for what the Lord has done. And another thing we've talked about too is not just wanting to celebrate our past story, but really bring people into that to show the Lord's faithfulness.
Yeah, it was really good to just see the way that God is faithful to us in that, like we said, but also where he said, this is going to be hard, but this is what is bringing about the most sanctification, and this is like what's making you more like Christ. And I think that time really, really challenged us. And really did refine us and make us more like Christ, and that's like our ultimate goal, and that's the Lord's ultimate goal, and so it's good.
Yeah, it was
all good, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing our story. Okay, well, welcome to the life and times of Erick Lyon and Katie Mullen. Amen. I want to tell our story mostly so people will know that we didn't actually meet at Treasure Island Resort and Casino like initially was thought. So I feel like it's important to get the full backstory out in order for truth to be known. We're about to tell you a story about how we fell in love and how we stayed in love. Amen. Not at all. Okay. So I'm sitting on my bed. I just have to be naked when my neighbor walks in.
Fast forward that part.
Okay. So is this how your prayer went? Lord, I pray for Eric. Amen. P.S. Please knit our souls together. Amen.
And I'm thinking, okay, you like ask if you can call me Kate, you like order my favorite book, and then he like is like, oh, have you ever heard this song? And he like links me this song, and I'm like, okay, he's like being a little intentional with me.
It's mentoring.
I was like,
it's discipleship.
All right.
I love students. Really? Yeah.
The one of 3 side hugs
Right.
that you gave me before we were dating.
Yeah. The only physical contact we had
Right.
prior to dating.
Wait, are you clarifying this?
Yeah. For anyone who's listening from Northwestern College, we had 3 camp appropriate side hugs before we started dating. So
So Eric kind of knows what to expect, and I'm still thinking, okay, maybe there's hope that we can hang out, like maybe there's hope that we can still like talk to each other as long as under the radar, like
above the radar.
or
Yeah, not under the radar.
Well, under the radar of all the students.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, like,
in the radar of HR. On the radar of HR.
There's something about the word us, where I was like,
Brad goes, well, we're real close to Tim's house. Let's just stop in there. And I'm thinking, oh no. Yeah.
and so didn't really work too well.
It gives us our dreams though, right?
Right.
Which is funny because I normally have dreams about like my retainer falling out, things like that. Not normally about relational things. So actually I had a dream about that last night, that my permanent retainer fell out.
Well,
That's not funny. That's actually, I meant to tell you guys that. And I left my left hand was amputated. So it was actually a lifelike prosthetic, which I think is pretty impressive.
art took a toll.
Okay, so backstory. We're on spring break. We're on a cruise. We're both at a roulette table. I say, what's up, baby? Put some money on number 3. She puts down her next semester's tuition on number 3. Deuces. Tuition paid for. That's how we met, fell in love, getting married.
End of story. That's a wrap.